Hi, gang. Well, today I'm welcoming Dan Schwabauer, who was someone who was instrumental in my writing when he introduced me to the five elements of story, which are not setting and so forth, but other things. And so he really set me on a path to better writing. And he has another course that I did too. And he's going to talk to you today about what he does, and mostly he teaches about um, journalistic type writing and fiction. And he has courses for middle grade and high school. So if you're into middle grade and high school, you have those age children, any of you, you will want to listen to every word he says. Okay, take it away, Dan.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me and inviting me to talk about my favorite subject, which is story. I'm a story nerd, and I'm passionate about it because I really believe humans are wired for story. And for a long time in our culture, we've consumed stories and we've considered them entertainment, but we've kind of downgraded their ability to teach. And so the courses that we do, we've been doing, we have a small publishing company called Clearwater Press. Our flagship program is the one-year adventure novel. We also produce something called Cover Story, which is the middle school program. And then high school programs, one-year adventure novel, Byline, which is journalistic writing and academic writing. And then a newer program called Other Worlds that's kind of a follow-on course for older high school, like 11th or 12th graders, and it focuses on science fiction and fantasy. So my emphasis for years has been learning the language of story. I spent 8 years in college, studied creative writing, and I well actually longer than that because I'm just graduating with another degree. But I
Oh,
went
how many degrees you have?
well in a couple months it'll be three, but
Okay,
it's that's a different story.
okay,
I mean
don't
it's
worry about
not super relevant, but I'm really fascinated by story, and so I studied as a kid. I always thought I wanted to be a writer, and I thought, well, where do you go to learn to write? You go to college because that's where they know how to write, and it's true to some extent. But I spent 8 years there studying creative writing, the techniques of creative writing, and it wasn't until I graduated, got a master's degree in this, creative writing. Now I know, right? The world wants to hear from me, and like the world didn't care. Nobody cared about what I was writing,
it.
and it took me a while to come to terms with the truth of I studied creative writing and I learned what I call word photography. I learned how to make sentences pretty, but I didn't learn how to tell a story. And story
Mhm.
was the point. It's always the point. So I had kind of humbled myself and said, I know what a story is when I read one, and I know what a good story is that I like when I read one, but I don't know how to make one.
Mhm.
So what is a story? And you've heard me say this story of me pursuing this before. I kind of had to look at the mountain of narrative art from a different perspective. It looks different when you're analyzing it than it does when you're creating it. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm convinced when anybody sits down in a movie theater seat, let's say, or they crack open the newest novel that they pre-ordered or something, they're looking for a certain kind of experience. And that experience, if their expectations are met in an unexpected way, if it's fulfilling and revelatory, even if they don't think, eureka, they see the world differently. If there's something about it that really gets their emotions going and that makes them see the world a little differently, they'll say, that was a fantastic story. This is what I do when I read great stories or I watch great movies. And we were wired that way. I believe God wired us on purpose for story. It's why the Bible is like 70% narrative
Mhm.
and some either that or metaphorical poetry, and only something like whatever the remainder is discourse, what you might call discourse. It's not mostly propositional, it's mostly narrative. The
Mhm.
the, the messages, if you can call them that, are communicated through symbols and more like narrative change, dynamic
Mhm.
arcs, character arcs, things like that. So I went on this quest. I want to know how stories work, and I started reading every book I could find on it. I started going to conferences. I started tearing apart things that I loved, reading them and rereading them, and taking notes and going, where did I feel, in this story, and why did I feel it? What did the writer do? And so after a while, um, I had first book that my first published novel was called Run the Brave, which came out in 2004. And I'm a different writer then, but like now than I was then. But I started speaking at homeschool conferences that year, and I had parents come up to me after one of those conferences, and they said, "Will you create a curriculum?" Because I started talking about all the things I'd learned. Uh,
Mhm.
and I said no, and I kept saying no. And this one particular day, I had something like 20 to 30 parents ask me, "Will you create a writing curriculum?" And it got weird. It was a little weird. It's like it's a few people, and I started going, "Did you guys get together and talk about this or something?"
Yeah,
And
is this like a group?
yeah,
Yeah,
I was like, "Did you know what? Let's go like talk him into doing this." I just knew it'd be an enormous amount of
but
work.
it wasn't, was it?
Oh, well, actually, it was an
Was
enormous
it?
amount. But it was. Here's what happened. I went home and I took a nap. I was really tired from all the stuff I was doing, and I woke up, and this is the only time in my life it's ever happened to me. I had the outline for the one-year adventure novel in my head. I knew it was going to be a tremendous amount of work, and it was going to take years to do. And I went down to my office and I wrote it all out. Like I spent an hour and a half just taking notes on everything. I don't know how to explain it. It sounds
That's
weird,
fast though.
but it wasn't done. It was just, this is what it will take.
Outlined.
It was a plan. It was an outline and a plan.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, well, if my wife Carol is behind it, then I'll think about it. But if she says no, I'm going to use that as my excuse to get out of doing this. I thought there's no way she's going to be behind me spending the next 3 or 4 years doing this. And I told her about it, and she said, "You have to do that." And I went, "Oh,
Oh
no,
no.
yeah, too much work." But that was the best thing. I'm so glad that I did it.
Well, you have such a heart for kids.
Yeah, I love the students. I love the subject, and I really feel kind of sad that so many people go through this. The thing I went through, where they go on this journey of they feel called to something they can't define, and they're fascinated by the stories they love to read, or they love, whatever their favorite fandom is, and there doesn't seem to be a place for them, or they study English, the English
Mhm.
language, and you read works of great literature, and you go, well, I'm not Shakespeare. What does it have to do with my interest in stories? And
Mhm.
there's a connection, because Shakespeare was a great writer. But the thing that's not taught is that language of story, the thing that makes us love one character and be so mad at the other one, the thing that makes us feel fulfilled at the end of the story, the thing that makes great dialogue work. And dialogue doesn't work because it sounds like real life. It works because it doesn't sound like real life, but it's still believable. That's a
Mhm.
trick. You know, we can believe it, but we're not bored by it the way we are, real life. If you just follow people around and listen to them, it's not all that interesting most of the time. It definitely wouldn't be worth putting in a book.
Mhm.
So there's these techniques, and I didn't want young people to have to spend the time and the money and the pursuit that I put into it. I thought, it's hard enough practicing and getting good at it. If you're practicing and you don't know what you're practicing, like learning to play a sport when you don't know the rules and you don't have a coach. That's kind of what it felt like. So
Mhm.
maybe I can be the coach, and maybe I can give them some direction.
Mhm.
So we have the one-year adventure novel, which is basically takes students through the process of writing their own novel in one school year, and they get a full language arts English credit, high school credit for it. Along the way, I teach them the techniques of fiction. I teach them story. We do take apart literature. We study some great stories. It's not always great literature. Some of it is, but not all of it. But
Mhm.
they're all great stories. And after we did the one-year adventure novel, took me 4 years. Then I spent another 4 years working on Cover Story, which is a middle school program, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. We do have ninth graders who've done it, but it was designed for sixth, seventh, or eighth grade. And that's a short form writing program where students it is a language arts credit for a year, and they create their own magazine. So they create
Oh,
the any content from a magazine, from short stories to editorials to letters, like letters to and
yeah.
from the editor, nonfiction stories, recipes, reviews.
That sounds amazing. And all the kids really probably know each other that are in it too.
It doesn't have a forum component,
Oh,
but what we
no?
do is
Okay,
6 times a year we do a contest. So I will actually do webinars specifically for the middle school students, and they will send things in, and then I will brag about their work in front of the other students. On the video platform that we use, there is a sort of a public forum space. We don't encourage them to go there, but they can ask questions, and we will answer them there that way.
okay,
But the idea is that they can pick their own whatever they love, whatever their favorite subject is. It can be ballet or horses or Minecraft or tanks or whatever, and then
Mhm.
their whole magazine is themed around that. And at the end of the year, then we have our finish line contest where they submit basically everything in their magazine, and we pick one that's kind of the best of show. And we do other awards for like the best ballad or the best limerick or the best
Yeah.
short story. So those are the two programs we did first. The third one, Byline, is pretty rigorous. It's ostensibly a journalism program where the students uh, work for me as a 1930s era newspaper editor at the Metropolitan World Daily newspaper, and I am taking the students at the chronojournalism desk back in time to do do journalism on the past. So they have to research various stories. The first
Mhm.
semester, I give them the stories to research, and I show them where to go to find the background material. And then they write these things that would appear in a newspaper. What
That's
I
neat.
don't tell them is that the assignments I'm giving them are really forms of academic writing, because there is an overlap between journalistic writing and academic writing. When
Mhm.
you write a hard news story, you are doing an expository essay. When you write an op-ed, you're writing a persuasive essay. If you want to write a narrative essay, you can actually structure that like a feature story, the feature story
Mhm.
that would appear in a newspaper. And so I don't tell them, I don't use any of that gobbledygook jargon. I don't use the academic jargon, because when I was in the high school and someone said expository, I was like, I don't, I don't want to do it. Whatever it is, it sounds medical. It's like I don't want that. So but a feature story. Now, what's a feature story? Well, it's about maybe some guy that was living, homeless down in the downtown area, and he invented something, and it changed the world. Like,
Yeah.
wait, really? Yeah, that's
You
a
could
true
do a
story.
feature story about Walt Disney. That would be fun.
Yes, you could. Yeah, actually could. It would be a really good story. So I tell them at the end of the year, congratulations, you just wrote 26
Mhm.
essays, and it's all in a way to prepare them for writing in college. And then the last program, and I'll make this quick, but the last one is just it's a follow on the one-year adventure novel. They write another novel, but they're either writing a fantasy novel or a science fiction novel. So we go deep into the backgrounds of those genres.
Mhm.
Two most powerful and influential genres right now in our
Mhm.
culture. They've been driving Hollywood, and as a result, a lot of worldview
Mhm.
perspectives that people have for at least probably 12 years. They've been
Mhm.
doing that, and like the major blockbuster films all have fantasy and science fiction undercurrents to them,
Mhm.
presuppositions. So my emphasis is on helping them to understand story, but also making it relevant to life so that they can use what they learn to become better writers, to express themselves better, to take what they learn and apply it in college. And most of all, the number one thing I hear from students is, well, thank you, Mr. S. You ruined all the movies for me. I say, no, I made you a better gatekeeper for your mind.
Yeah.
Because when you can see the underlying messages and themes, you get to decide whether you want to be manipulated by them or not.
And some of the new movies are, I don't even see that.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot. I mean, there's some good stuff coming out, but there's a lot of stuff that's pretty subtle and
Mhm.
not necessarily healthy
Mhm.
psychologically or
Yeah.
spiritually. But I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that can be pretty damaging that is very well crafted technically, and yet the elements underlying it are not well crafted at all. They're deceptive. So
Yeah. Well,
that's
thank you.
that's the programs in a nutshell. Yeah.
I think you have one for adults too, don't you?
We have a platform called Story Coach, and that is storycoach.thinkific.com, and that is it's the one-year novel program that's kind of has the teen elements kind of stripped out of it. It
Okay.
also has a version of the science fiction and fantasy program
Okay.
on it as well. So if people wanted to
Okay.
go there, the main site for the homeschool stuff is clearwaterpress.com. And
Okay.
the other one is just storycoach.thinkific.com.
Okay. I'll put that Clearwater at the end of the
Okay.
video so everybody can write that down.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for explaining that. I
Yeah,
hope
well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I always love
welcome.
talking about story.
Yeah. All right. See you next time.
Okay.